Hello everyone out there on the Eat the Rich universe. Dwight here, and I'd love to present to you another episode of Dwight's Bights. I think this is the third one. I'm recording this on Saturday, June 13th, and it's one of those just absolute top 10 days of the year. Just cool, dry, just absolutely gorgeous. And despite that, I've spent a little bit of time inside here, and I was learning about something that I hadn't heard of before. And I think, especially in our current political moment, and with the very important advent of the strengthening of the Black Lives Matter movement, and having that Black Lives Matter message being spread, especially amongst a wider group of people that otherwise would not have cared about the struggle of Black people, people of color, and the working class writ large, I'm trying to do a little bit more of self-teaching of Black history, because I'm sure most of us, especially those who, have been through the American public education system like I have, just really got a completely insufficient Black history education. And I think it's important as on ourselves, especially if you're white and you're listening, that you take that extra step, learn about Black history, and understand the previous struggles and the lessons that we can learn from them, so that we can move forward and move towards equanimity and, most importantly, justice. To that point, there was a news item or a historical happening that happened in 1984 that I learned about today, and I felt so compelled with this story that I wanted to share it with you guys. And it revolves around a woman named Eleanor Bumpurs, and specifically the shooting of Eleanor Bumpurs. And I'm going to explain this to you now, what happened here. And the reason I wanted to bring it up to you was I found that there were many, and we'll talk about this when we kind of wrap it up, but there were many through lines between what happened, now over 30 years ago and today. So I'm just going to give you a little overview of the incident, and I think we'll be able to kind of make our point just with this overview. I'm going to be reading from the digital archive of the League of Revolutionary Struggle, specifically an article that was from Unity, also known as La Unidad newspaper. And again, this was from 1985. We're reading the article, and it's a one-year retrospective. And it starts off with a quote from Mary Bumpurs, who was the daughter of Eleanor. And the quote reads as such: "The law doesn't stand for us. All I want is some justice, and I'm in this battle till the very end. We have to keep going so that people don't forget, because just like it was my mother, it could have been somebody else's mother." So this is out of the Bronx in New York City. And I'm going to read from this article now. And it reads, "This October 29th is the one-year anniversary of the death of Eleanor Bumpurs, a 67-year-old Black grandmother who was shotgunned to death by city police during an eviction procedure. 1 year later, police officer Stephen Sullivan is still on the force, and the community is still fighting for justice. The killing of Eleanor Bumpurs stands as one of the most barbaric instances of racist police violence against the African American people. The tragedy began months before the fateful day of her death, with the racist indifference and incompetence of two city bureaucracies, the New York City Housing Authority and the Human Resources Administration. Eviction proceedings were started against Miss Bumpurs when she was only 1 month behind her $97 a month government-subsidized apartment, even though she had a good rent payment history. The HRA, the Human Resources Administration, has emergency rent funds for seniors facing eviction, but they were never offered to Mrs. Bumpurs. Instead, an HRA psychiatrist who briefly interviewed Miss Bumpurs came up with the bizarre and legally questionable advice that she should be evicted and upon her eviction taken to a hospital. Now, on October 29th, 1984, the day of her eviction, the psychiatrist was nowhere around, but a city marshal came to evict Miss Bumpurs. When she refused to answer the door, the police were called, even though police are not supposed to be used in evictions, which are civil matters. A team of half a dozen officers from the Emergency Services Unit arrived wearing masks and carrying shields, a long iron restraining bar, and a shotgun. They forcibly entered the apartment. As she tried to dodge the restraining bar, Stephen Sullivan fired his shotgun at Mrs. Bumpurs. Though the blast destroyed her hand, and with it a knife she was allegedly holding, Sullivan fired a second round and fatal blast at her chest. The police's racist disrespect for African Americans did not stop here. They carried Mrs. Bumpurs, still alive but bleeding terribly, out of the building naked. A few weeks later, when her family was allowed back into her apartment, they found part of her finger. Under capitalism, money is more important than human life. A city investigation into the Bumpurs case concluded that the eviction was justified because Mrs. Bumpurs was behind in her rent. This is fucking barbaric. The bungling at HRA was dismissed as errors in judgment. The only action taken was to demote 2 supervisors and terminate the psychiatrist's contract. As for Stephen Sullivan, the police department claimed he was acting within guidelines. Now, this next part is where it really, aside from the unbelievable brutality on behalf of the police, this is where it started to get a little bit more salient to what we're seeing today, and we'll talk about this afterwards. Outrage at the murder of Eleanor Bumpurs was immediate and widespread. There were demonstrations, marches, candlelight vigils, and coalitions that were formed. At the same time, Koch, and they're talking about Ed Koch, then the mayor of New York, worked hard to thwart justice through blatant attempts to influence the grand jury that was convened to investigate the case. The Police Benevolent Association, that's one of the cop unions. I don't know how many there were then, but as of now, there's 6 cop unions in New York. The PBA flexed its political muscles, staging a demonstration of 10,000 police outside the Bronx District Attorney's Office, the largest demonstration of police ever held in the U.S. Well, just fucking wait. The PBA spent over $15,000 in radio advertisements defending Sullivan. Elliot Gross, the chief medical examiner, tried to aid the police by editing Mrs. Bumpurs' autopsy report so that it would not specify the number of times she was shot. It's fucking insane. In January 1985, the grand jury indicted Sullivan on charges of second-degree manslaughter. The right wing continued its campaign, however, and succeeded in getting these charges dismissed in the state Supreme Court in April. On September 26, a hearing was held in the appellate court on the Bronx District Attorney's appeal to reinstate the charges against Sullivan. Once again, as they have done many times over in the past year, people from the Bronx and the rest of the city packed the courtroom to show their insistence that justice be done. So the question is, why do we bring this up now? In the midst of this burgeoning economic depression and difficulties brought on by the novel coronavirus and the global pandemic, a few things have stood out, especially for the black community. One, despite Americans being only 5% of the global population, 30% of the deaths from COVID have been in the United States. Completely disproportional. And then we take a look at what the actual numbers are demographics-wise for the deaths within America. 70% of COVID deaths have been black people. The healthcare system is irredeemably racist. A for-profit healthcare system is irredeemably racist. And if we look at the kind of half-hearted protections that have been put in place, especially in New York City as far as evictions go, those evictions are going to expire at the end of July, I believe. So if we look at what happened to Eleanor Bumpurs, this was an eviction. This all happened from an eviction. I'm not saying it's all going to happen at the same time, but the apparatus that allows for these atrocities to occur happens within the confines of policy and state. This was a judicial proceeding, although it was completely bungled. And then if we look at other causes for eviction, we need to take a look at black wealth. So I'm going to read here just a couple pointers from the Samuel Dubois Cook Center on Social Equity at Duke University, and there are key findings about the racial wealth gap in America. A few points here. One, the black median household holds just 10% of the wealth of median white households, and while black people constitute 13% of America's population, they hold less than 3% of its wealth. And none of the myths commonly offered to explain away the racial wealth gap, for instance, a need for greater educational attainment, home ownership, entrepreneurship, a lack of proper savings behavior, financial literacy, or commitment to buying and banking black, or a renewed focus toward soft skills, personal responsibility, improved family structures, or emulating successful minorities. None of that comes close to accounting for the vastness of the wealth gap in America, the racial wealth gap in America. And in fact, and they close here, they say, often these myths aren't just wrong, but the exact opposite is true. For example, on the topic of savings behavior, a study conducted by the Institute on Assets and Social Policy using the 2013 Survey of Consumer Finances found that at comparable levels of income, whites spend 1.3 times more than black people. Or when it comes to prioritizing education, black families tend to be more supportive of children's education through direct financial support than white families in similar households and socioeconomic positions. So anytime you hear the argument saying like, oh, well, people just need to be better at saving things, blah, 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 fuck all that. That has nothing to do with it. There is a racist fiduciary system in this country. And so we say that to say, if we tie all of these things together, you are more likely to be violently evicted if you're black, and you're more likely to be evicted in general because of the racial wealth gap in America. And even then, even when something goes completely horrendously wrong, there is a white supremacist organization like a cop union that is there to take out ads and wage a public opinion campaign against you. And let's not also forget the other really important thing that we need to get rid of and get away from in the court of public opinion, which is the idea of a perfect victim. Because we've seen it a million different times with every black person that's been killed by police. Is the first thing that happens is that the right wing goes and looks to see if they have any criminal record, to see if there's any social media pictures or videos that could be construed as, hey, this person wasn't such an angel themselves. It's complete fucking bullshit. It's victim shaming. It's wrong and it's racist. And we need to call it out vehemently anytime we see it. I can't remember who said this, and I'll see somebody just to, remind me or something like that, they said that we need to be aggressively nonviolent as a baseline. Anyway, I hope this paints a picture that's valuable for you. I hope, we continue to go on this intellectual journey together, this cultural journey together, this political economic journey together, and educate ourselves with the information that, the ruling class, the capitalist class, the ownership class, whatever you want to call it, the managerial class, does not want us to understand. Because when we arm ourselves with this information, we become all the more powerful. So thanks for sticking with me. Thank you for listening, and stay cool, folks.